Just when it looked like the Commanders were finally catching a break at one of their most important positions, disaster struck again. Starting center Nick Allegretti, who only just returned to the practice field, has already gone down for a second time, and it's raising a question that fans might not want to hear out loud, but absolutely need to be asking right now. Should this team actually be benching its veteran center in favor of an unproven rookie? Let's start right there because this story deserves the top spot today. According to a report straight out of Ashburn, Nick Allegretti left practice early once again just one day after finally getting back onto the field. This marks the second separate injury for Allegretti during this training camp alone, and whether this is a fresh issue or some kind of lingering flare-up from his original injury remains unclear for now. But here's the part that should genuinely worry Commanders fans. If this ends up sidelining him for another extended stretch the way his first injury did, there is a legitimate argument to be made that he shouldn't be handed the keys to the starting center job at all this season. Consider this. Nick Allegretti has never actually started a game at center anywhere in his NFL career up to this point. That's an important detail that tends to get lost in the shuffle. Center is arguably the single most cerebral, communication-heavy position on the entire offensive line. The guy responsible for making protection calls, identifying fronts, and building that all-important rhythm and chemistry with the quarterback. That kind of chemistry does not develop by accident. It gets built through reps, timing, and repetition on the practice field. And right now, Allegretti simply isn't getting any of that. Meanwhile, on the complete opposite side of this story, rookie center Matt Golden out of Michigan State has been quietly building a genuinely impressive case for himself. He looked sharp in the preseason opener, and by all accounts, he's continued flashing in practice as well. So here's the real question worth sitting with. If the rookie who might represent this position's actual long-term future is healthy, available, and performing well, and the incumbent veteran keeps landing in the training room, at what point does it stop making sense to keep waiting around? If Allegretti bounces back and returns to practice tomorrow, this entire conversation becomes a non-issue. But if this latest setback turns into another multi-week absence, heading deeper into camp, there's a real defensible case for simply riding with the rookie who's actually available and playing well right now, rather than continuing to gamble on a veteran who can't seem to stay on the field. Unfortunately, Allegretti's situation is just one piece of a much larger, increasingly alarming injury puzzle currently facing this football team. Let's run through the rest of it because the list keeps growing by the day. Backup quarterback Marcus Mariota remains sidelined, continuing to work his way back. Running back Rachaad White popped up with a brand new injury, and while the full details haven't been disclosed yet, he was notably absent from practice entirely. Veteran running back Jeremy McNichols continues working through a quad issue that's expected to keep him out for multiple weeks. Defensive lineman Tim Settle has also been a repeated absence from practice. And defensive tackle Johnny Newton was missing as well, dealing with a situation that deserves its own dedicated conversation in just a moment. Let's start with a little bit of good news buried inside all of this, because Tim Settle actually appears to be trending in the right direction with indications that he could be back on the practice field within the next week or so. That would mark the very first time fans actually get to see him suited up at a Commanders practice heading into this season, and there's real excitement attached to his eventual return, given the significant role he's expected to play at nose tackle in this new defensive scheme. He already flashed real ability handling early down run stopping duties during his time in Houston last season, so getting him fully integrated could be a meaningful boost up front once he's cleared. Now, the situation with Johnny Newton is genuinely concerning, and it deserves careful attention. He's dealing with a pectoral injury, and as of this update, he was in New York consulting with a specialist to determine the best path forward for treatment. Pectoral injuries are notoriously unpredictable in how they're handled, and if this situation ultimately requires surgery, it could realistically end his third NFL season before it even really gets going. That would be an enormous disappointment given the expectations surrounding him heading into this year. Newton is a former high draft selection who many expected to take a real step forward as he entered a more mature stage of his career, and instead his early returns have been rough, particularly struggling as a run defender. During his preseason debut against Miami, if this pectoral situation does end up sidelining him for the rest of the year, it raises real, uncomfortable questions about how much this coaching staff can continue to lean on him heading into future seasons. The absences don't stop there either. Veteran defensive lineman Dietrich Wise remains on the physically unable to perform list as he continues working his way back from a quad injury suffered last season. Two of the team's starting edge rushers were also missing from practice, another notable subtraction from an already thin group up front. Off-ball linebacker Jordan McGee, who genuinely impressed in the preseason opener, is now dealing with a shoulder issue of his own, and cornerback Trey Amos remains stuck in the exact same frustrating limbo that's been hanging over this entire training camp, still working through that lingering ankle injury. Here's why the Trey Amos situation specifically deserves continued attention and real concern. This is a brand new defensive scheme being installed from the ground up, and he has accumulated essentially zero meaningful practice time within it. Yes, he did technically return for one single day of practice at one point, but he was almost immediately back in the trainer's room dealing with that same ankle issue shortly afterward. There's a lot being asked of him heading into this season, learning a completely new defensive system, building real chemistry and communication with a group of teammates he's barely had the chance to actually practice alongside. The silver lining here is that this cornerback room does have some legitimate experience depth behind him, guys who've played real snaps in this league and could step in if needed. But it remains genuinely concerning heading into his second professional season that he simply hasn't logged the kind of practice reps a player in his position desperately needs right now. So, stepping back and looking at the complete picture, this injury list has genuinely spiraled into something significant. A center who can't stay healthy, a star defensive tackle potentially facing surgery, a promising young cornerback stuck without reps in a totally new scheme, multiple starters up front and in the backfield working their way back from various ailments. This is exactly the kind of accumulating adversity that can define a season before it even officially begins. And it's putting real pressure on the coaching staff to make some difficult decisions in the coming days and weeks. Now let's pivot to a much lighter storyline to close things out, because there was some genuinely positive national recognition handed out to this roster recently. ESPN released their list of blue-chip prospects under the age of 25 from around the entire league, essentially a list highlighting the brightest young building blocks across football. A couple of names actually graduated off this year's list after aging out of eligibility or simply establishing themselves beyond blue-chip prospect status, including franchise quarterback Jaden Daniels and a veteran cornerback on the roster. But two brand new names were added to the list for Washington this year, and it's a really encouraging sign about the direction this young core is heading. The first new addition is second-year right tackle Josh Connerly Jr. out of Oregon, who finished last season on a genuinely strong note and earned real recognition for that late-season improvement. It's worth noting that reports suggest he hasn't had the smoothest start to this particular training camp, but there's real optimism that he can continue building on that late-season momentum and take another step forward at right tackle this year. The second new addition is rookie linebacker Sonny Styles out of Ohio State, who also earned a spot on this list of blue-chip young talent. What makes this list particularly interesting, though, are the notable names who didn't make the cut. Offensive lineman Trey Adams was left off the list entirely despite showing some genuinely encouraging flashes last season, though his current injury situation may have played a role in that omission. Safety Nick Cross and wide receiver Antonio Williams were also left off the list, somewhat surprisingly given their respective contributions and development so far. Regardless of who got snubbed, seeing two more young players from this roster recognized nationally as legitimate blue-chip talents is a genuinely encouraging sign. It reinforces exactly the kind of youth movement and talent infusion that this front office set out to build heading into this offseason, and it's a small but meaningful reminder that amid all of this concerning injury news, there's still real foundational talent being developed on this roster for the long haul. So here's what I want to know from you. Should the Commanders seriously consider handing the starting center job over to rookie Matt Golden if Nick Allegretti's latest setback turns into another extended absence? And how worried are you about Johnny Newton's pectoral injury potentially costing him significant time or even his entire season? Drop your thoughts down in the comments and let me know exactly where you land on both of these situations. That's going to wrap up today's roundup of everything happening around this football team right now. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want daily coverage like this covering every single injury update, roster move, and storyline as this team heads toward week 1, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now so you never miss an update. Drop a comment